policy roundtable and wrap up. We normally use this session to put all of our thoughts together. We often like to be able to suggest to African governments a few things that they need to think about, reflect on as they make policies. So that's the object of this particular session. What we also try to do is to bring together people that have had a long time to reflect on some of the issues that we've been discussing over the week, and then share with us their thoughts on these as we think about the future. So the whole idea is to be more future-oriented in this final session. Today, we have selected as the theme for the final session, global challenges and the implications for research at African universities. What I plan to do is to give each of the panelists 10 minutes to express in their own style their thoughts on the issues, global challenges, and what the implications for these are for research at African universities. In effect, what should the African universities do in light of these global challenges if they want to advance research? For today's panel, we have Professor Imran Valodia, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Commerce, Law and Management at WITS. Imran Valodia is an economist who I've known for a long time by his work on inequality, and I've been an excellent colleague in this regard. Jean Pavlovsky was supposed to be joining us, but he had to leave last night. We expected Robert Osei, who is the Dean of the School of Graduate Studies at the University of Ghana, to join us. We have with us Professor Margaret Jason Hutchinson, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation and Enterprise at the University of Nairobi. And then finally, we have our own host, the lady behind the organization of the conference here at the University of Lagos, Professor Bolanle Obo, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic and Research at the University of Lagos. So let me invite you first. I had earlier asked Professor Nelson Boniface from Dar es Salaam whether he would like to join this panel. I was not sure of his. Are you interested in joining the panel, or you're not comfortable? You can join. Yes. Thank you very much. I know that sometimes I give people too much pressure, but the pressure is good. Yes. So, Nelson Boniface is a Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research at the University of Dar es Salaam. So thank you very much, Nelson, for agreeing at extremely short notice. But once a DVC for research, these things come to you naturally. So let me invite Imran to make the first 10-minute statement. So after they've spoken for 10 minutes each, I will ask each of them very clear questions coming out of what they've said, and in order to get a follow-up. So that's the whole idea. So Imran, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ernest, and thanks to our hosts for the invitation and for the fantastic time that we've had here. I want to draw three themes together that I think we've heard kind of repeatedly in the conference, and kind of suggest that the three themes come together and kind of kind of jointly bring up a huge challenge for universities in kind of in Africa. So the first theme that we heard a lot about was the fact that population growth is going to be substantially a factor in Africa, and that if we look at what the projections on population growth look like, the next 60 years are really kind of a story about Africa. Let me give you one or two data points to just illustrate that. And I'm going to use the case of Nigeria because this is where we are. So if we look at the official UN population projections, from now to the year 2085, Nigeria is going to add 300 million people to the population of the world. The kind of city that we're in, I've heard kind of estimates of your population being around 20 million. The kind of official numbers that I could find tell me that it's somewhere between 15 and 16 million. But the projections tell us that by 2085, Lagos will have a population something in the order of 35 million people. There's 2 points to draw. One is that population growth is going to largely be in Africa, and two, the implication of that is that the numbers of young people is going to be largely a story about Africa. So that's the first point. The second point, we've heard a lot about technology, and we've heard a lot about AI. My field's economics, and I think about this as a problem, as a problem of jobs. So there is clear evidence that what is kind of happening with AI and with tech is that it's being kind of driven largely by forces outside of Africa. And two, that the kind of implications for jobs are going to be pretty serious. And if you link that to my earlier point, the fact that we're going to be sitting with a large number of young people, I think raises really important questions for how kind of our societies are going to change, and how are we going to provide kind of reasonable kind of income generation possibilities for most of us on Africa, or kind of in the African space. The third theme I want to draw on, and we've mentioned this a lot, is climate change. So I'd hope to put up a slide that shows you who has contributed to these to kind of greenhouse gases for the last 250 years. What that data tells us is, if you take South Africa kind of out of the picture, and you need to take South Africa out because it's a bit of an outlier. Basically, Africa's contribution to global greenhouse gases stock is less than 1%. So we have contributed a fraction, a negligible fraction of the problem. But if you contrast that with who's going to bear the consequences of climate change, the countries or the parts of the world that are going to bear the highest costs of climate change is going to be is going to be Africa. So the 3 points I want to make collectively is that population growth is largely an African story. The technology that we're seeing is largely coming from outside Africa, but the implications of it are likely to be felt in the next 100 years. Most negatively in Africa, because it's likely to have huge impacts on jobs. And the last point is that although we haven't caused the problem, the facts are that we are going to pay the price for climate change, not only in terms of its impacts, but also the kind of only way that we know to date about how to create large numbers of jobs is to do it on fossil-based energy. That door is now closed, right? If kind of Africa does what what was done in China to raise income levels, we will push this world beyond beyond a climate, beyond a climate catastrophe. So the 3 points I think linked mean that we really have to play a much more active role in shaping the agenda globally for what AI is doing and what the focus of AI should be. I'm particularly struck by a book by Darren Acemoglu, and Simon Johnson. I'd hope to show you a picture of that too. But what the book does is look at the last 1,000 years of evidence on the links between technology and work. And one of their key conclusions is that we shouldn't be driven by thinking about technology as something that's coming from the outside, that we have absolutely no power to shape and no power to manage. In fact, the history of society is the history of managing that problem. I think the fear for me is that it's being managed by forces outside of the kinds of real issues for Africa. And I think the policy agenda has to be one where on all of these 3 issues, the voice of Africa has to not just impact on it, but I think we really need to shape what those trajectories will be. For that, we're going to need a large amount of research, and I think the work that we're doing in ARUA is a fantastic start in that regard. But it's going to require a quite substantial increase in our ability to do that. And it's going to require policymakers to really be a lot more influential in the international space. I'll stop there, Chair, with 5 seconds to go.
So, Imran, you've given us the 3 issues of climate change, population, technology, and how these interact to cause problems for us. Do you think that African universities are doing enough in this area in terms of trying to influence their government? Are they doing enough research? And how is that research made available to policymakers?
So I don't think that we're doing nearly enough. I mean, if we take any one part of that debate, let's pick up on the climate change issue. The pace at which climate change is being addressed is massively being shaped, I think, by kind of agendas in the global north. Just look at the way finance is working. Look at the way the investments around renewables are kind of really being shaped in the global north. And look at how far we are off that off that curve. So I think the kind of universities are starting to deal with it, but I think the kind of agenda, Chair, is massive, and I think we're going to need a much more imaginative set of ideas from our universities and a much more imaginative set of research outputs to support us, not just being part of it, but if you accept the demography point, we kind of really have to shape that question. So I think there's a lot of hard work to be done.
Thank you very much. Let me call Professor Robert Osei, who is the Dean of the Graduate School in Ghana, at the University of Ghana, to make his 10-minute pitch.
Right. Thank you very much, Prof. Aite. Good afternoon, colleagues. I want to believe that I came in a bit late, but I know Imran has touched on the key global challenges that confront us today. Of course, the typical ones that we have heard usually is the COVID, right? Which caught almost everybody off guard, but had its positive sides as well because we had to react to it. And now the cliche is the Russia-Ukraine war, which has almost over the last few weeks been overtaken by the Israel and Hamas issues. But one of the things which, as research institutions, we haven't also reflected too much on has to do with some of the intentional policies that have happened in some of the countries in the global north. So you take Brexit and its implications for mobility. And I would reflect a bit more on that as I go on. So clearly these have had adverse implications. Most of them have had adverse implications. Of course, the COVID has its pluses because a lot of the efficiency gains that we have seen over the last few years was essentially triggered by the COVID, okay? So it has had its pluses in spite of all the very significant adverse implications it has had. But from a research institution perspective, significantly for African research institutions, all our, or most of our resources are coming from the global north. And so when there is an economic downturn because of the challenges that we face in today's world, it has ramifications for what happens in the research institutions. Okay, I mean, and specifically in terms of the research institutions, we know that I've seen some studies that point to almost 90% of research funds coming from the global north. Okay, sometimes they come through proxy institutions or organizations within Africa, but ultimately they are coming from the global north. Typical example, ARUA. Okay, so you can think of ARUA as an African institution, but essentially the funding is coming from the global north. And so research funds are significantly impacted by these events over the last few years. So we know that not only is the level of research affected, but the scope of the research is also affected. Okay, but importantly, because a lot of the funds are coming from the global north, and it is not always the case that the funds come with ample flexibility in terms of the type of research you do. What it then means is that you are also somewhat constrained in terms of what research you can do. And of course, that then will mean that innovative ideas are not always able to see proper research or get proper research backing because of the issue of funding. In, 2020, I believe, with the UKRI through ARUA, for instance, the funding that was given to the clusters of excellence, no, not the clusters, centers of excellence. For some of the centers, I presume it was all, or at least the center I am associated with, the funding was cut. What it meant was that we needed to revise our research ideas as well as the scope of the research. Okay, so again, that's a typical example of how these research funds or the events of the global nature do affect research institutions. Of course, a lot of the research institutions also rely on these funds for not only infrastructure, but also equipment. Again, here I'm speaking as someone who sits at the School of Graduate Studies and particularly concerned about what happens in the physical sciences and what they do. A lot of the equipment is not being funded from within. A lot of the equipment is being funded using resources from elsewhere. And so where we've had significant impacts or adverse impacts on the research that is coming into these institutions or our institutions, it does affect us negatively. One of the issues also that I really want us to avert our minds to has to do with mobility and exchange. And I think over the last few days, we've heard a lot about the positive contributions that mobility and indeed exchange engenders, particularly within research institutions in the typical African institution. In today's research institution in Africa, not only is mobility problematic for researchers, but student exchanges has also become quite problematic. Of course, you can think of the financing side, but that is just one side of it. The soft side of it as well has quite dire implications for exchange and mobility. Again, I know that following the COVID, we had our EMBA students going out to other universities in the global north to meet other EMBA students over a period of time. over the last few years, it has become a big challenge getting visas. And I mean, the typical EMBA student is not somebody who wants to or is prepared to walk through the desert to go to an European country. Okay? But significantly, we've lost quite a bit of that exchange because of happenings in the on the global stage. Okay, so I mean a typical example as well. As part of the ARUA Guild clusters, we are supposed to be going to the Netherlands. We are putting together, finalizing a proposal, and over the last 2 months, we've been trying to get visas to the Netherlands, and we are not getting appointments. Okay, so again, these are minor things, right? But they still will impact on mobility and exchange, which is a critical component of training. At least it is for graduate level training, as I see it. So just a few reflections, and I know I have just a minute. I think that for those of us here, gathered here, we are part of the elite. And we need to be part of the discussion, particularly in respect of policy in our respective countries for increased funding for tertiary education. It needs to happen. Okay? Of course, we need to be very thankful to the platform that ARUA has created, and now ARUA and Guild, and the capital that we've gained as a result of that. However, for us, we also have a responsibility to take advantage of that capital and move it forward. So we need to be true partners in co-creating the research agenda that the platform seeks to provide us. Thank you very much.
Please stay there for. I like the last suggestion you made after highlighting the challenges associated with and also associated with mobility and exchange students and so on. Clearly, considering the suggestion that you just made at the end, you would like to see us engage with our governments. Can you be a bit more specific? What can African universities do, or can African researchers do, or should they do in order to get the attention of government? It's not the first time that governments are going to be told, are there specific suggestions what can be done? Sometimes we talk about things like advocacy. We talk about things like showing them results and so on. Have you seen examples of these being done in some places and how they've sort of influenced government thinking?
So thank you very much. Coincidentally, we were just talking about this in our last session, so you might have got to the question somewhere. But it is true. So I believe that the what we know, it is the how. And in my mind, I think that we constitute a strong force, particularly now that we have a platform for collaboration. So we have more evidence, and we have broader evidence in terms of what works in other places, but also it's now not just the roboticized face that will be at the table engaging with policymakers. So now you can bring researchers from UCT, from VETS, from Nairobi, from UNILAG, to be at the table, and of course our guild partners, to be at the table to engage policymakers in the best practices of what works and what, of course, will not work. Because obviously, what we cannot do is to continue to do the things that we are doing. We need to change, both as the stakeholders in higher education institutions, but also for policymakers.
Thank you very much. Let me now call, yes, please give him the applause. Let me now call Professor Obo to give her 10 minutes. Professor Obo.
Me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to do this. Well, our theme for this conference is Reimagining the Future of Higher Education in Africa. And what we are looking at now are the global challenges and implications for research at African universities. Over the past 3 days, we have reviewed various topics, and we have been told that the global output towards research from Africa is just about 1%. And when we look at West Africa, the region to which we belong here, it is a paltry sum compared to whatever you have all over Africa. It's not even up to 1% of what is obtainable in Africa. And then we looked at the number of articles per city in Africa. And we find that per year, number of articles per city per year in Africa. And we find that it's only Cape Town and Cairo that has over 1,000. And those within the 500 and 999 bracket belong to Pretoria and Joburg. So none in the West African region fall within those that have over 500 articles per year. And we know that these cities I have mentioned actually host the top universities within their regions. And so we have Accra, Lagos, Ibadan, Abidjan having just 250 to 499 articles per year. This research output was not even improved despite all that was done even during the COVID era. So when we begin to look at all this, we see that yes, ARUA is a good one for African universities, especially the top research universities. But something just comes to mind, that it means that within the West Africa, Central Africa, East African sub-region, we need to double up and deepen the research we do within ourselves and amongst ourselves, and how this research would have impact, not only for, the impact must be for Africa and must be for the regions in which we are located. We are being confronted with figures of population growth. We are being confronted with issues of food security. We are being confronted with issues of unemployment. And so we must begin to look at how we will solve these issues within ourselves. I think for me, the jobs, our income, how does AI relate to all this? And I think at this point, Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, must be able to define in clear terms our research agenda. And that research agenda, when well defined, must also be able to place AI within that context. How would AI solve our problems, but at the same time make sure that the jobs are still there for our teeming population? AI in sub-Saharan Africa must not be adopted because it can solve all technological problems, but it must be adopted because it will solve our problems and it will create more jobs. Youth should not be allowed to lose their jobs because of the AI technology. So I think that calls for more research, that will call for more creative thinking, and I think we need to actually begin to deepen that conversation. For ARUA as a body, I will think that yes, more advocacy, but I think they have done well. And we will look at the report of ARUA even from 2015 to 2021 with the universities they have worked with. I think that is a good template to be able to begin to engage the bodies within Africa, the Africa Union. In West Africa, we have ECOWAS. In East Africa, there's a body like that. In South Africa, they also have their body. I think we need to engage them more to see the progress we have made and see how they can begin to fund research more in Africa. I know South Africa does a lot through their National Research Fund, but I know that in West Africa, there is nothing being done even by ECOWAS towards research, and I think they need to be brought on the table, even apart from the African Union as a body, because we cannot always go to the north for funding. We have to begin to look at our problems, which are local to us in Africa. Problems of food security, it's germane now with climate change. There are a lot of our indigenous crops that are totally neglected and are good sources of nourishment for our teeming population. So there's a lot to be done, but we have to define that agenda and then be able to source for funds within these bodies that would also help to grow research within the African sub-region. I think it is time, and I believe it is time, and I believe we will soon get there, where Africa will be the one dictating the terms of what they want, and we just have to continue to press in that area. The ARUA Centers of Excellence, the 13 of them, and now the 20 clusters of research excellence with the EU Guild. The areas they cover are areas of interest in Africa, public health, technology, I think there's something on water. So those areas are germane, and I would expect that going forward, we will be able to really deepen our research in that areas to impact more in Africa for our development, for our growth, and for the sustainability of the teeming populations that we have. And I believe that if we are able to do this, some of the political instabilities, the youth trying to move through the desert or through the Mediterranean to Europe will come to, it will reduce, it's not going to stop because we are a global world, people need to move around. I also think that the African universities must begin to think of our transnational programs within ourselves the more. How do we get our students to have student exchange between the African countries? Most of us will have student exchange with Europe through the Erasmus program, but what can we do within ourselves with our students and also with our staff? I know that ARUA has been able to help establish that with staff, but we need to move to the area of our students to begin to have the experience and then be able to open their minds more to the problems that we have that are common to us, and so we'll be able to develop that further. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Obo. So your opening remarks suggested that Africa should be able to define its research agenda, including how it is going to treat AI. So let's say that the Nigerian president has heard you and feels very, very sympathetic and says, okay, University of Lagos, I admire what you do. I have $100 million. Show me 3 things that we can prioritize in the use of this. What would be your suggestion?
One, I will go into the area of technology in terms of making water, clean water, available for the Nigerian populace. That is important. Another area of research I would look at is how do we have food security. Nigeria, at this point, we import a lot of what we eat. And so we need to be able to look inwards and see how we can, with all the changes in the climate, grow our own food. And then thirdly, education. Fund education, fund research, and then you'll be able to get more results. Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, that's commendable. But as you put more money into research, into water, into education, and into health,
yeah,
the roads are getting appalling. So
infrastructure.
are you going to ignore the roads?
No, infrastructure. As you are doing that, definitely. Even the roads. The roads need research. Why I say the roads need research is that with the kind of rainfall patterns we have here, our roads are repaired according to maybe the British standards, which they have been using over the years. And so year in, year out, the roads fail. So there still needs to be research into what are the best materials we need to use, best sustainable materials we need to use to construct roads in Nigeria that will make them durable. What we have in Nigeria is that the roads are done, within 2 years, everything collapses. By the time we have 2 heavy rainy seasons, the road has collapsed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I invite now Professor Margaret Hutchinson?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Chair and colleagues. What I have tried to do is to look at this policy roundtable discussion from a systems approach, where I'm looking at the strengths, at the weaknesses, at the opportunities and the threats that face us as universities and as a continent. And I will use the term policy in a loose manner, that this is just a statement of intent. And so as we have met in this beautiful city of Lagos, we have actually looked at the threats that face us as universities, but also as a continent. So we've talked about the geopolitical dynamics that are either political, economic, social. The disparities between the north-south, south-south is a challenge. And those dynamics that are real are affecting the way business is done at the universities through the entire value chain, from funding to the kind of curriculum that we also offer, even to the outputs and where we publish. And as someone has said, that he who pays the piper actually calls the tune. And because the investments from African governments is still very minimal, maybe 2 to 5% if you are lucky. And so the issue of equity within and outside Africa, that we are a global community, but also very separate, is a reality. And then coming to say then, as we look at trying to turn those threats into opportunities, the weaknesses into strength, is something that we have come to inquire together. Because in the process of dealing with these geopolitical dynamics, we have seen poverty being mainstreamed into our lifestyles, and that has also a gender lens, that 4 out of 5 poor Africans are women. And unemployment, especially among our youth, are just some of the challenges that we see. But internally, we look at the strengths that we have and we say, we have come under the umbrella of ARUA, and we need to deepen and broaden what we are doing right. And that is looking at African problems and looking for African solutions, albeit with the support from our foreign friends. And so the issue of aligning our research, I think we have done well in terms of the strength that we have aligned our research agenda to the national as well as the continental aspirations of our people, influencing policy as much as it's not as much as we should get. But we want to see how we can mainstream those workable models that we have shared together. Internally, I think there is an opportunity for us to have a mindset change in the way we conduct business at the universities. We need to look at governance at the universities in the sense that, as John Maxwell has rightly said, that everything rises and falls on leadership. And so we have to be the team lead. We have to be the leaders of how governance is done so that maybe our countries can also learn from us. The opportunities are there, and we have come to inquire the position of a university. Why do we exist? Why do we exist, and for who? And how do we go forward from here? Reimagining the university of the future. Repositioning research at the center of the national discourse. Repositioning Africa in the global discourse that is going on. And so we are saying, can we reposition the universities and the research agenda for impact that will count for our communities? We cannot do business as usual. It must be business unusual, where we are impacting our communities in a very transformative manner, because then we become relevant, we become sustainable, we become important for any dialogue. There was a conversation in Kenya that, is there a place for a university? Can we do, if there was no University of Lagos, would anybody care? If there was no University of Nairobi, would anybody care? And so the issue of impact relevance is something that we must continuously, as a university, guard jealously so that we don't become irrelevant. Coming to the funding, I think we have an opportunity as part of ARUA, but also at the national level, to lobby the AU to be part of this agenda. We talked about the Africa-European clusters of research excellence with the guild partners. The AU is silent. We must lobby our governments and the AU to be part of this transformation agenda if the universities are going to survive and become relevant going forward. We must embrace the emerging technologies, not just the AI, the digital transformation, while looking at the demographics and taking advantage of the ballooning youth, not to see it as a problem, but as an opportunity for us to use that going forward. And therefore, as we look at the value chain from the inputs to the environment in which we are operating, it was enabling to the outputs, we must ask ourselves, how can we have justice for the continent of Africa? You know, people meet every other year under COP 27, I don't remember which number now they are in, and they commit that they are going to pay for their sins of omission and commission, and then they don't do nothing about it, and we are too weak to have a conversation. So I believe that we live in an atmosphere where there is free thinking. We are the only part of the society who can think freely without being captured. Of course, some people do that, but I'm thinking that we are the think tank for our continent. And so we have the best brains, we have the highest concentration of intellect. We must provide leadership and also empower our governments in terms of having evidence-based research data that can influence policy, but also strengthen their lobbying agenda so that they just don't look at the budgetary support, but they also look at the developmental agenda that is being provided by the academia, by the research community. More importantly, as we must continuously engage, I know my counterpart from University of Lagos has spoken about food insecurity, talked about poverty and all that, but we are saying, who is going to have that conversation except us? And so we must be the solution providers. We must do what we are doing right, so we will deepen what we are doing, strengthen what we are doing, but we must also broaden to other areas so that we don't stay in silos, because development agenda, because otherwise we will continue to have a paradox where we have graduates, postgraduates, student mobility, professors going up on the academic ladder, but our societies remain unchanged. And so the challenge to us going from here is that can every dollar that we put, every shilling, every naira, can it count for something? So that the other generations that will come after us will count as worthy to have spent time and effort for changing the tide of development in our continent. May God bless you.
Thank you very,
I'm
very
ready
much.
for the exam now.
Thank you for the passion that you brought to the discussion. That's great. You say that universities are the think tanks for their countries. Does your government see you as a think tank?
To be safe, I think I'll just use Kenya as an example. I think they do, and I think they don't do. I remember one time when we were looking for, why I'm saying that is, you know, you look at the funding, and we have a fund that is normally implemented by the parliamentarians, may I put it that way. You dare touch that money, they will stop the business of parliament, and the country will come to a stop still. Now, they have committed themselves to pay 2% of the GDP to support research. As we speak, we are at 0.48. Nobody can cry about it. So yes and no. They see the value because when there was COVID, they asked us, what can we do? And the University of Nairobi, with the support of other partners, came together to establish a center for epidemiological modeling and analysis that was able to advise government on how to behave. When there's food and nutrition security, there's a challenge, we are able to do the same. Currently, we are also implementing a project where we are talking about climate resilient infrastructure. So yes, they value us, but they also don't value us, because when it comes to putting your money where your mouth is, that is where we are a little bit behind from government. So they would rather not be, they say we are law-abiding citizens, government, but they will not agree to fund research, but they will fund the constituency development fund because it is by politicians who are more powerful and and they control the budget anyway. So if you look at even the funding formulas that they put there, they are student-centered. It doesn't matter whether you are a professor and you have a huge budget, nobody will care. Or rather, they care just a little bit. But yes, there's opportunity for us to continuously dialogue, because these are our colleagues. Many of them are professors. So continuously dialoguing around what is important for our continent, because otherwise the book of lamentations will continue to be written about Africa. But we are saying we are here to write a different script for our continent.
Thank you very much. Nelson, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Professor Ernest. Actually, when you asked me to stand before this podium and address this audience, I was not prepared, but I thought that I would come and speak, share some of the experience about funding and the research in Africa, the challenges that we face. So probably I'll be the last speaker. I'd like to share the funding and the relevance of the research that we do in our countries. Are these funding aligned to the national research agenda? If you get funds for research from Danida, from CEDA, and the likes, are really these funds aiming at solving our own problems? That's a challenge. In the past 5 years, I tell the story of Dar es Salaam. I come from the University of Dar es Salaam, as has been introduced. We decided to develop a policy of funding our researchers, and we established a fund known as a competitive research fund that is aiming actually at looking at the problems that we really face and we want to solve them. And the fund for the first year, in the first 5 years, the past 5 years, we spent 1 billion Tanzanian shilling, equivalent to 400,000 USD. And that money was distributed among our staffs that you can get as much as some 12,000 US dollars. It's not so much, but we give this small cake to our staffs. After the first call, we saw the impact. Some of our staffs who had no funds for their research could now start doing their research. And in the second year, third year, we improved the funding. Last year alone, we gave some 3.1 billion T shillings, equivalent to 1.24 million USD. And the impact of that, we started seeing it at the promotion of our academic staff. We had a massive promotion this year alone of our staffs because they are doing research now, and this is not, the fund is not supporting them to do research alone, but getting papers and getting promoted. So they are like internally being motivated. Additionally, they do research policy, that is policy briefs, which are informing the government and the university on the problems that we face and how they should be solved. And now, if you go back to the history of the funding of DANIDA, CEDA, and the likes in the past 25 years at the university, they have been funding for about more than 80% of our funds. But if we convert this small fund that we have set aside for the next 25 years, will be the big funder of our own university. And that's the same scale of the money that is being given. Now, what is this solving? The problems that we have that is aligned with the national agenda of our country. And also, our students, our staff, who are really doing this more research, they do topics of their choice. Because if you get money from the donor, you have to align to the policy and do the research that is actually aligned to the interests of the funder. So you have to respond to their problems and answer their problems. Probably they are not answering the problems that your nation is facing. This is a big problem to many African universities. Now the problem comes on data dissemination. With this meager or little funding, do we compete to send this data to big journals? Because sometimes you don't have big fund, so you don't have a large statistical information to get your data being accepted. But your data actually are relevant to the national agenda. They do answer to most of the problems that you are facing. Some of the funds, for instance, we do like look at the challenges on lack, for instance, of groundwater, water at our compound university. So we use some of the funds to search for water and have the water being supplied at the university. But that's an ongoing research. That's one of the benefits that we are going to get. But when it comes to global ranking, and this fund is also promoting our local journals, global ranking, are we seen globally? That's a big barrier that we are facing because some of this data that are produced by these small funds won't be published in these big journals, and you won't be able to actually being ranked properly or well ranked by these big agents that are ranking our universities. But they are ranking based on citations without regarding whether these research or outputs have addressed the agenda of the respective nations Now, that's why some of our colleagues, some of the universities now are rejecting these rankings, which are becoming barrier to the research outputs in our institutions in Africa, and causing a lot of problems to our researchers. Probably we could adopt this model in our institutions, or probably have better one. I will be glad to share and hear from others what you are also doing. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you very, very much, Nelson. Just a quick question for you. Yeah. Clearly, as we've seen a significant drop in global funding for research in Africa, you have been innovative and responded by providing from your own resources, grants to your staff who do research. Yeah. I heard you say you give around $12,000.
Sorry?
$12,000.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, which is not a small amount for an African university.
Yeah.
For most of this I've seen in other, it's a very large amount, $12,000. You know, I think at University of Ghana you do about 3,000, 4,000. You know, okay. So the question is, how do you finance it?
How?
How do you finance it? The source of it.
The source is internal funds, because we have some small projects within the. We have malls where we can get funds, internal funds, so that we can do that funding. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so this will be overheads from projects. Does it include student fees and so all those things? Does it include student fees?
Some, yes, we can get some from the fees. Because we get, for instance, from the consultant services, some 75% of that money can fund that one. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
From consultants.
It's a very impressive thing,
yeah.
And it's something that I hope other sub-Saharan universities will emulate. Thank you very much. Let me now turn to our patient audience. If you have a question for any of the 5 panelists, please raise your hand and I'll be happy to call you. Yes. Just before intervention comes on, I want to mention that ARUA is currently being evaluated. The 2 evaluation consultants are here, and one of them is going to speak. I hope he's not going to use this to say African universities should finance everything that they want to do. Where's the microphone? Oh, I've called somebody here already. I'll come to you later.
Thank you, Chair. I'll stand up. Yeah, I've attended many of conferences such as this. And what I've observed is that we are preaching to the choir. We are preaching to the already converted. All of us here know what the problems are. But the key players, 2 key players are not here. I was glad to see policymakers here. But the business sector is not here. Whatever knowledge we generate in universities, we do not have the capacity to propagate it. It is the private sector, the business, which needs to take up those ideas. But if they came here, they'll only spend 5 minutes, they feel like you are wasting their time, they will leave. So this is a challenge. Yes, we can do policy briefs. I have done policy briefs at the highest level, at the AU. You give them to the heads of state. When the meeting ends, all those policy briefs will be left in the room. So we really have a challenge of convincing our policymakers to take up the main brilliant ideas that we have. Thank you, Chair.
My question back to you is, in other parts of the world, let's say, for example, the European Union, and Peter is here, can bear witness. In the European Union, there is a forum or an avenue for universities to make their voices heard. Why can't we establish the same thing in Africa? And you are asking you because I know you are very close to the AU.
Yes. Yeah, I think there are various fora where universities meet and discuss these issues. The challenge is, as I said, we need to have policymakers in our midst, and they must be interested. In fact, my experience that academicians, when they become policymakers, they are the worst supporters of what we do in universities. They are very, very negative. That is my experience. But I agree with you. We need fora, but we have RU Forum, we have ARUA here. These are forums where we meet and discuss, but we also need to have all the players in the innovation systems. Because as long as other players are missing in the national innovation systems of ours, we will not get very far. We will talk and talk forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, thank you. Kwame.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wanted to make a contribution, a question you asked about how you get policymakers to listen. And I want to be very frank, we are not very good at speaking to policymakers. I have spent quite about the last 10 to 15 years engaged with policymakers. I'll give one example. I worked with the World Bank team when Rwanda was moving from 6 to 9 years basic education to model how they can expand their basic education. We worked with the Minister of Education, Professor Morinzi, at that time. We did all the modeling and everything, and we made one big mistake. We didn't involve the Minister of Finance. So when we presented in a forum, and the Ministry of Education, the Minister of Finance asked us, where do you think the money is going to come from? What are the implications of what you are recommending? We said they should, in order to cut down multi-grade teaching, have more teachers. We model to have more teachers. He said, yes, on paper, having more teachers is good, but we can't fund it. So often we don't talk about the cost of the things we are recommending to government. Then secondly, we also have to find the right language. When I worked with with UNESCO as a policy analyst, we had journalists in our team. And some of you may have heard this figure, 260 million children out of school. The journalist told us that we need a number. And I remember saying, why do we need a number? He said, to grab the attention of the policymaker, we need a number. So we thought, well, and that number, if you look at it there, we sat down together and came out to some, it's not very rigorous, if I'm very honest, but it was a good approximation. That number is cited by many politicians. And that's the way we started grabbing their attention. 260 million children out of school, you get the politicians' attention. And I don't think we do enough as higher education, in the higher education. Our research, if we present the research we are presenting like this to the higher, they will just not listen. And then secondly, we have to think, who are the policymakers? We keep saying policymakers. There's a difference between the politician, the minister, who is there representing a manifesto. And it's not that they don't hear your evidence. Your evidence is part of many considerations. So you have to understand, how do you engage with them in a way which grabs their attention? And in Ghana, we have started if I can call it an experiment, where we formed a research consortium. We've managed to get the ministry to have a steering committee and have the research consortium represented at the steering committee. The ministry itself advised us that if you don't get outsiders in that steering committee, the government's agenda will override the evidence. Okay? So we have to understand the politics of how we present evidence. And I don't think as academics, we actually understand the world of these policymakers. And we think that simply by presenting our evidence, they will listen. It never happens anywhere. I think you always have to find ways in which you can present the evidence in ways which can communicate meaningfully. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Any other comments? Yes, Tim.
Thank you so much. We've had a lot in these last 3 days. And sometimes when you analyze what you have been, the information you are fed with, and you process it, and it's like the signal we are getting is that we are facing, it's not a, it's a world, we are living in a world that has been polarized. And we are living in a world whereby is competition, not cooperation. We are living in a world that is appearing to be the power that be are only interested in what is interest them. So, we've tried this for many times. What can we really do moving forward? Because all these things you are saying, we've done it before, we tried this thing before. But I don't want us to get to that mood. I don't want us to get to that mood. But one simple thing I would like to say is that there are frightening figures that we have gotten in the last 3 days. I think it was yesterday that someone told us that in the next 50 years, 1 out of 2 persons walking the surface of the earth will be an African. Yes, and we have heard here today, again, that population, the world is, African population will become the world population in the next few years. And this is, to us, is an advantage, but to some people, it's a threat. If slavery, if machines replace slavery, AI is to replace manpower. Very simple. Because there are parts of the world that have gotten to zero population growth. And how do they replace the population that are doing it now with machine? So people in one part of the world is thinking of the problem that is facing them because of the population growth. We have the population growth. So it's our responsibility to think of how to resolve our problem. They won't solve it for us. They won't solve it for us. But what I want to say is that I want to really appreciate ARUA. I want to really appreciate ARUA. And I want to appreciate the existence of the centers of excellence. In the last few days, we have heard about collaboration, mobility, exchange program. This can only happen through the centers of excellence. The gain we have in the last few years, as demonstrated by our center chair, Professor Familoni, is that before, African scholars will talk to the scholars in the global north. But at the advent of ARUA, we know ourselves across Africa. And that's a starting point. It can be a little first step, but it's a step in the right direction. So if ARUA could really invest on the, help us grow the centers of excellence. When we do this collaboration, that the one we've been doing in the last 2 years, the last 3 years, if we can run it for the next 5 years, we'll see more gain. All this ranking and index and all this will become African focus. We can only get this through the centers of excellence. And we have started. All we need to do is to scale up. With the network grant we got from UKRI, we did a lot of exchange program, but the grant, for many of us, many centers, we've closed that grant. And the question now is, which way forward? So, if we can sustain the centers of excellence, most of the problem identified in the last 3 days will be resolved through our centers of excellence. That's what I see. That's the light that I see at the end of this dark tunnel, so that we don't enter the frustration mood that we've been trying this, does not work. Let's look inward. That's why I asked the question in the morning. How did China get to this level of development outside this Science Direct, this journal, Scopius? How did he do it? Can we learn one or two things from China? Can we look inward, Africa, through this network and really develop what we need to move forward? That they will solve our problem for us. No one will solve our problem for us. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah.
It's been a very interesting 3 days, but I want to just lend my voice to the conversation. And my plea will be that, is it possible that when we imagine the future of Africa, we should have more young voices, not just at plenary session, but also at roundtable discussions? Because I know what I'm thinking, and it's different from what I've learned. And these are stages that have evolved over time. And then secondly, I also want to appreciate the Center of Housing, because through them, I had also been able to privileged to sit among great scholars and listening to this knowledge and impactful ideas. And the last thing is it possible also when bringing in young voices, because we realize that many of us don't know how to write, especially when it comes to grant, and knowledge is open to like the last echelons of knowledge to write for applications. And most times this information might be just at the grassroots, but they don't have the opportunity to do that because it has to be given to the most elderly or the most, someone who's been there for years. So it's just a plea. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm Adeni Emmanuel, Association of Commonwealth Universities. I just wanted to ride on what she just mentioned to say that I think also of all the things that has been mentioned, I think there's also need for us to start thinking about intergenerational mentorship. There was a time that Egypt was a world power. There was a time that some of these African countries were really known to be world powers. But that's not the case right now, right? It means there was a generation that missed it. There was a generation that was not in touch. So in as much as we are making this progress, these pockets of progress, I think it's important that we need to start thinking about how we pass the batons, especially in these conversations, such that the young people are also keeping track of the progress that has been made. And so I just said that to support what she said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So just a reaction to that. The whole of today's sessions is devoted to young, early career researchers. I hope you are aware of that. The whole day. So we brought to this event over 60 young people paid for. So it's not as if ARUA is not mindful of the youth and their future as researchers. ARUA has a clear program to train young early career researchers. And sometimes we will continue growing so long as the resources permit. Okay?
Thank you, Chair. Mine is just what I will call a deep introspection from what has happened in the last 3 days. A lot of concepts have been brought out, a lot of ideas have been thrown up, and a number of challenges. This is the fourth ARUA Biennial International Conference. And hopefully we'll be going to the fifth. This year, we are reimagining the future of higher education in Nigeria. Sorry, in Africa. What worries me is what do we do with output that comes from all these intellectual cross-fertilization of ideas? I am looking forward to when the communique that will be coming from here will be looking like the future of higher education in Africa, a transition from rhetorics to reality. And therefore, the chair mentioned about evaluation, and that the team on evaluation are already around. I think that one of the ways of transiting from rhetorics to reality will be to look at the output that is coming from all the research centers of excellence and the research clusters. First and foremost, how do we communicate the output coming from those research in order to reach the appropriate audience? Secondly, how do you scale it up? I was at a parent session yesterday where we talked about, somebody presented a paper on frugal innovations in the health sector. And it was quite an eye-opener. Most of the things being raised there, a number of innovations that are simple, rugged, lightweight, and that can also be utilized across both rural areas as well as the urban centers. In what ways are we harnessing what is coming from some of these research clusters and centers of excellence? Finally, in also transiting from rhetorics to realities, we may have to reimagine our engagement process with the policymakers, with the government, with the industry, especially what do they call them now? The medium-scale enterprises that we have across Africa, because most of what we do in Africa is more of the informal sector than the formal sector. Chairman, ending up again, reimagining the future of higher education in Africa, the communique should address transition from rhetorics to realities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Peter? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I'm fortunate enough to be employed by the university in the high north, close to the North Pole Circle, and a university in the far south, in Stellenbosch. 16 hours of travel, at least. Not very environmental friendly, but very worthwhile. And what we have in common, these two universities, is much more valuable and much more relevant than what might divide us. The same here at the campus of the University of Lagos. And one issue that connects us is that we know how to communicate. Whether you're from Oslo, from Stellenbosch, from Lagos, academics like to talk. They're very good at it. They like their debates. They like to communicate with each other through their academic publications. But we've not been very good. We've not become very good in communicating with society. We've employed in our universities people in communication offices, but usually they're very good at PR, but not in communicating. So that is one thing that Professor Arietti, Jan Palmowski, and I and others involved in the communications with the European Union, with other stakeholders, what we've learned is that we've got to adapt our way of communicating. We cannot come with questions. We cannot come with demands. But we have to identify and understand what it is that we have in common with the policymakers. And we found out what we have in common and where we have common interests that connect us. And that is what has contributed to the development of the joint idea of clusters of excellence, which create a unique, really a unique capacity, not just for collaboration, but also for addressing issues in society that are lying ahead of us. And from that perspective, also on the basis of what I've learned during this wonderful conference, I would like to add two important issues to the conversation that has taken place this afternoon and during the conference. And one is the demographic issue. All the predictions over the next 10, 15 years show that by 10 years from now, at least 40, if not 50% of all students in the whole world will come from Africa. And that is a reality. And from that perspective, what the universities in Africa are doing on their own campuses, in collaboration with other universities in their country, with stakeholders in society, with other universities on the continent, is not just of relevance for Africa, it's of relevance for the whole world. I mean, solving tomorrow's solutions, I mean, if half of the next generations of scholars in the world come from Africa, we're going to be relying on African scholars to a large extent to produce the kind of ideas and breakthroughs that can help us solve tomorrow's problems. And from that perspective, one of tomorrow's problems, climate change, that has been addressed in many ways during this conference, will also require us to look not only at artificial intelligence as a new technology, but at green technologies. The way in which we contribute to sustainability in society will, to a large extent, determine our place in society. So I had the pleasure of, together with Professor Osai, at being part of the session on the climate change and development session before this. And there, a number of key issues around sustainability and the university's role were addressed. And I hope that we can all contribute to this issue of sustainability, development of green technologies, developing technologies together with the communities that we are connected with, private sector, public sector, as well as policymakers and politicians. Because that is where, in the end, the understanding of our societal impact comes from. What will be our contribution to policymaking? What will be our contribution to civil communities? What will be our contribution to the private sector? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Let me now come back to the panel and I get the closing thoughts on all the things that they've heard this evening. So let me start from the far end. Bola.
I think in summary,
If you can use the microphone.
okay. I think in summary, we are looking to Africa to solve Africa's problems, and we are looking for our young ones to step up the more and be able to come in and do this for us. Thank you.
Margaret? No lamentations.
Where there is a will, there is a way. We can do it.
Yeah, I think as Africans, we need to join hands and work together. We can do it together. If we separate, we will fall, each one away without knowing where we are. Okay, thank you.
So all the three presenters have been very quick, so they are forcing me to also be very quick with my comments. I think I just wanted to reflect on the point that Professor Champon made and re-echoed by Peter, that we as academics are probably not very good at communicating. Of course, we know that there is a lot of research that we are doing in higher education, and we don't know how to communicate it properly. But let me assure you that we are not starting from ground zero. Thank you very much.
This is the first time I've seen academics not using the microphone. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this final session. And it's really appropriate. Thank you very much. It's appropriate that we should thank the people that put it together. Let me thank the panel, especially Nelson, who at very, very short notice agreed to come and tell us about the wonderful things happening at Dar es Salaam. So thank you very much. I understand that the LOC wants to do something. And so the LOC will do what they have to say. And then I'll invite Madam Vice Chancellor to come and give us her closing remarks. Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you very much. So, Professor Grace Otiwa, team. Oh, yeah, there you are. Okay.
The General Secretary, Vice Chancellors, our dear Vice Chancellor, conference participants, it's indeed my pleasure at this time to invite our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic and Research to present and also recognize various sponsors who have supported the 4th Biennial Conference of ARUA. Professor Bola Obo. Thank you.
First of all, we want to say a big appreciation to the ARUA board for deeming it fit for University of Lagos to host this conference. And the major sponsor of ARUA, Carnegie, towards this conference. We are very, very grateful for the support and all they have done to help us put this together. However, as a university, there are some people that have stood out and have assisted us and helped us to put this together. And so we will want to say a big thank you in our little way to each and every one of them. The first person I will call will be the ARUA Secretary General. He has been here since Sunday, and our postgraduate school, I don't know whether they are represented here. Postgraduate school, if they are not represented. Emma Smith Investment Limited, represented by Professor Akomo, please come forward. Howes Consulting Group, represented by Professor Amuda, please come forward. Access Bank, if you are here, please come forward. Zenith Bank, Dr. Okoye, to hold a brief for them. And the Unilag Business School. Please, if you are here. Thank you. So, please come forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. On behalf of the University of Lagos, we say thank you very much for your contributions to this conference. Thank you. Who is speaking? Professor Amuda, are you around? Yeah. Thank you very much for all the support you gave to the conference. Thank you. Highly appreciated. Access Bank. University of Lagos Business School. Postgraduate School, University of Lagos School of Postgraduate Studies. Okay, we give it to them later. Zenith Bank. Zenith Bank, Dr. Okoye, are you taking on their behalf? We don't have the time. We don't have the time, please. Please, on behalf of University of Lagos, say a big thank you to Zenith Bank for us. Thank you. Yeah. To all our other numerous sponsors, Afritech, IREX, HDAS, the Unilag Microfinance Bank, Unilag Consult, School of Foundation Studies, Joint University Plenary Examination Board, Builders Consulting, and individuals who chipped in one thing or the other, we say a very big thank you. Thank you. Vice Chancellor, Ma, over to you.
Before I invite the Vice Chancellor, I'm asked to inform you that we have an evaluation form. So the QR code there, you can scan it, and then please give us some feedback. We would like to know all the things that we did right and the things that we didn't do so right. So give us all a very frank, honest feedback from your time with us for the last 3 days. So thank you very, very much. Madam Vice Chancellor. When you finish, I will thank you. When you finish, I will thank you.
I think we can say that in the last few days we have been reimagining the future of tertiary education in Africa. And I think the things that came out of it was that we will get there if we work together, if we believe in ourselves, and if we harness the expertise in different countries. It has been a pleasure hosting all of you here. And we look forward to much more of this kind of intellectual discourse. I think everybody will agree that the quality of the discourse at this conference was extremely high. And it shows you what we can do when we need to do it. However, there's something that's come out. We're not very good at communicating what we do to the public and turning our thoughts and expertise into development. We need to work harder in that area. And I'm sure as we keep moving forward, leveraging each other's skills and expertise and strength and working collaboratively rather than competing amongst ourselves, we will get there. Africa is rising and Africa is the future. Thank you very much. One more thing. Sorry, I need to thank Professor Arite and the LOC and everybody that made this work. I would love to say that it has been a pleasure working with this LOC because all I needed to do was smile, look at them and say, is it being done? And they say, yes. And I say, good. And I go to sleep. And they don't. So for all of you that put this together and worked so hard, the protocol team, the LOC, and everybody that worked behind the scenes, the CITS, I just want to thank you very much. Thank you for projecting the best of the University of Lagos. Thank you. And we were very happy to host you. Thank you very much for being here. And Prof, God bless you. Thank you. Last thing, wish you all safe journey back home.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Professor Folashade Ogunshola. Before I came here, I used to say Professor Folasade Ogunsola. I've learned a lot. Before, I've seen that my team, they're also holding some bags. You want to do presentations? Bring them in, yeah. Why don't you speak yourself?
Thank you very much, Secretary General, Professor Ernest Aite. We thought we'll also follow suit rather than wait to go to the cocktail area to do this. We'd like to do it publicly. We have 3 or 4 presentations to do, and the first, we've already done our first presentation to the Vice Chancellor. We'd like to do a presentation to Professor Bola Obo. We'll respectfully call our Secretary General to do this presentation. We say a very big thank you for your patience and your cooperation and everything that you've done for us, Professor Obo. Next is the chairperson or the chair of the LOC, Professor Grace Otenwa. Please continue with applause. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair LOC, for accompanying us in this process. Thank you very much. The next is the Protocol Officer, Madam Latifa Adekola. If she's not here, we can ask somebody to pick it up for her on her behalf. Madam Latifa Adekola. Okay, whilst we wait for her. Okay. So the next, we have something from Ghana for members of the LOC. Something very, very modest. So we will invite the chair to pick this up. Thank you so much, working with us day and night, and always with a smile. Thank you, Madame Adikola. And for members of the LOC, something very modest from Ghana. All our presentations are very modest, but it's the thought that counts, not what you have in your bags. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stella and team. It's now my pleasure and also my duty to thank the team for organizing this. I remember a little over a year ago, we had a meeting of the Deputy Vice Chancellors of ARUA in Accra, at Legon, and at that meeting, we were looking for a venue for the next conference, and Professor Sandy Adebisi, with that consulting his Vice Chancellor, immediately said, "Oh, we will do it." And then during the break, I heard him calling his Vice Chancellor in a very animated conversation, trying to convince the Vice Chancellor that he had already committed his university. So I guess the Vice Chancellor had no choice but to accept. And then soon after that, he was leaving office. And I was very, very pleased when, in the first meeting I had with him and the incoming Vice Chancellor, he mentioned that Lagos was going to host the next conference, and the incoming confirmed it. So that was extremely important for us. And today, we've seen how a very smooth transition and dedication to the cause has led to a very well-organized conference. So I thank the Vice Chancellor and her team for the commitment shown, the generosity shown, and the fact that they've been so welcoming, and everybody has attested to that. So thank you very much. I should also thank all of you. You've traveled from different corners of the world. Some of you have come from Argentina through South Africa. Some have come from Oslo. I've seen people from Brussels, from Ghana, from Wits, from Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Wales, Mozambique, Rwanda. You know, you've come from all over, and I thank you very, very much for the show of love for ARUA, your interest in what ARUA does. I've heard many suggestions about what ARUA can do in the future, and we will definitely discuss these through discussions with the Deputy Vice Chancellors, with the Vice Chancellors, and hopefully in the next few years, you begin to see a new ARUA. We have here evaluators, and I do hope that they've taken note of what has happened here, and I will let their report reflect truly what they have experienced. So I thank you all, and I wish you a very safe journey back home, whether your home is in Lagos or your home is in Ife or in Johannesburg. Thank you very much.